give you something to think about while I'm preaching. You think about that instead. But when is it that you felt the most joy? When is it you feel the most complete, the most whole, the most like you are at least becoming the person God intends you to be? So hold on to that. I'm sure most of us have at one time or another been in a meeting where whoever was in charge, our boss, our teacher leading a seminar, whatever it is, the person in charge has said, well, what's the feedback on this? And everybody chirps in, well, I heard this, I heard that. And then he says, well, but what should we do about it? Or what's the real situation? And all of a sudden, everybody's kind of staring at the table. Because nobody wants to be the one to blurt out and maybe get yelled at or getting it wrong. So that's kind of what happens in today's gospel. It's an interesting story. Jesus, traveling around with his disciples, says, well, who do people say that I am? And they all jump right in on that. They all chirp in. Some people say you're John the Baptist come back from the dead. Some people say you're Elijah, or one of the old prophets come back to life. And then he says, well, who do you say that I am? And all of a sudden, I'm just imagining everybody kind of staring at their feet, and getting real interested in the sheep that are over the field, waiting on somebody. It's kind of like here, it wasn't so much so this time, but sometimes before church when I say, all right, well, I need 3 readers, and one of the things I like about that is the sort of extrovert visitors sometimes will say, well, I'll read, which is cool. But the introverts among you all suddenly become very interested. And just keep their heads down until somebody points out I'll do it. And somebody will always break in my experience. And in this case, it's Peter. Peter's the extrovert of their group. He's always the one that jumps out of the boat and tries to walk on the water, that does everything first. And he has this great insight. You're the Messiah. The Messiah, the one who's come to save Israel, the Son of the living God, one of the other Gospels says. So he has this great insight. But then he immediately gets it wrong, because Jesus begins to say, that's right. And here's what that means. It means that I've come to be rejected by the religious leaders of our people, and to suffer a lot, and be killed, and then be raised on the 3rd day. And Peter said, that's not at all what I'm looking for. He rebukes Jesus, and Jesus in turn rebukes him. And then Jesus turns to the crowd, which apparently is right there, and begins to tell them what it means to be his follower. If anyone wants to follow me, let them pick up their cross and follow me. For those who try to save their lives will lose it, but those who lose their lives for my sake in the gospel will gain it, which is an interesting saying. Peter gets it wrong, because knowing the name, knowing the title, does not mean you understand what it means. And Peter knows, he has this insight, and so he knows all of a sudden who Jesus is. But what that means, he gets completely wrong. And it's not the last time Peter will get this wrong. The other disciples, the one who've been staring at their feet, hoping that Peter would crack and say something, they get it wrong too, over and over and over again, particularly in the Gospel of Mark, where they're particularly stupid about Jesus. But Peter continues on. Peter's the one who, according to some of the Gospels, the one who draws his sword in the Garden of Gethsemane and cuts off the ear of one of the people that come to arrest Jesus, thinks he can defend Jesus with the sword. Peter is the one who denies Jesus when he's arrested. And then carrying on into the book of Acts, Jesus says, Peter over and over again gets it, although he's one of the leaders of the church, he's over and over gets it wrong about what God wants, particularly with regard to Gentiles and Jews, how they work together. So Peter gets it wrong over and over again. And yet, Peter's the one who Jesus says, you're a rock, and on this rock I'll build my church. Peter gets it wrong over and over again. And it's okay. we do the same thing. My view of God, my view of Jesus changes depending on my mood and circumstances. And sometimes I see this and sometimes I see that. And often Christian people have acted as if the different Christian churches were in some sort of race or struggle to be the ones who get it exactly wrong. You know exactly what Jesus is, exactly what God is, and can teach everybody else and sort of sit in judgment on everybody else's views and everybody else's salvation. And it's a mistake because we can never plumb the depths of the mystery of God. We can never completely understand until St. Paul said, St. Paul says, now I know in part and I prophesy in part. In other words, I partly know, but some of it's me guessing. But then, once he's in the presence of God after his death or when Jesus comes back, then I will know even as I am known. The Gospels tell different things about Jesus, present Jesus in different ways, as does the rest of the letters of Paul and the other books of the New Testament. And so what this story tells me is that it's not critical to our lives of faith, to our salvation, that we understand exactly what God's up to, and that we're able to clearly say what we understand and believe about Jesus. What is important is what Peter does. The reason Peter is the rock, not because he gets it all right intellectually or theologically, but because he is always, even at his worst, in relationship with God, in relationship with Jesus. He finds his life, his faith, his whole purpose in following Jesus, in loving Jesus, and being in relationship. And to me, that's sort of the answer to to the question I raised before. When do you feel the most whole? When do you feel the most joy? When do you feel like you're the person, or becoming at least the person that God intends you to be? For me, and I think for most people, we find it in our relationships. Relationships are always complicated. There are ups and downs and pain and suffering involved in relationships, God knows. But also there are moments in which we feel whole. When you hold your baby for the first time. When you fall in love with somebody who loves you too. When you, on the best of occasions, not every meal, but on the best of occasions, maybe when you sit around the table with your family enjoying a meal, when you sit up late at night with a close friend talking and laughing and sharing your lives. It's when we open our lives to relationship with others and relationship with God that we find ourselves. I think that's what Jesus has in mind when he says, if anyone wants to follow me, let them pick up their crosses and follow me. The suffering that Jesus says he will undergo, and the suffering which from time to time the Bible recommends, I guess, to us, is not a glorification of just being in pain. I think God thinks it's an awful thing when we suffer because of the various woes and troubles of the world. The suffering Jesus undergoes, and the suffering that Jesus talks about, I think, is the suffering that's involved in acting as a citizen of the kingdom of God, in doing what the will of God is. And it's easy for us to protect ourselves from emotional pain by building walls around ourselves, by holding back from relationships, by not caring as much, we protect ourselves. But Jesus says, if you try to save your life in that way, you're going to lose your life. It's going to slip away from you little by little, and you'll never experience life abundant, life joyous, because we find that in relationship with others. But it's when we take a chance, when we let down our barriers, when we face the not just possibility but probability of suffering. As God knows, there's plenty of suffering in love. That's when we find our true selves, our true lives. There's an novelist I really like, Ann Tyler. Some of y'all have read her stuff. She's written about 1 jillion novels, and I have read about 4 or 5 of them. Probably her most famous novel is, because I made a movie out of it, is The Accidental Tourist. But she's written a bunch of stuff. There's one I particularly like called Saint and Baby. It's a spoiler alert involved in this, but the novel's really more about the beauty of its writing and its insights into human nature than about the plot. But the basic plot line is that there's this teenage boy. He lives in a fairly happy family, and he's a fairly good athlete and a sort of DNC student who's going to try very hard. And his sort of goal is just to do that, just to be regular, just to have a regular, happy, protected life. And then something happens, and he, in a complicated kind of situation, his brother's killed in a car wreck, and he feels responsible for it. And so he feels terribly guilty, and he takes on some of his brother's responsibilities, caring for his brother's wife and her children, and he feels like his whole life has been ruined, both by his misconduct and by the burdens he's taken on, because all those things that he had hoped for are all gone. But he ends up finding a weird little church. That will make you feel happy. He would be good for private. And begins to discover what his life really is about. And in the end, there's sort of this blessedness to what happened to him, because it makes him what he is. I want to read you the last paragraph from the book. Some of it won't make sense to you because you don't know the characters, but just listen to the poetry of it and the flow of it. He, the main character, he was halfway down the stairs when he felt a kind of echo effect, a memory just beyond his reach. He paused, and Danny stepped forward to present the newborn baby. "Here she is," he said, but then the moment slid sideways, like a phonograph needle skipping a groove. And all at once it was his wife he was presenting. "I'd like you to meet the woman who's changed my life," he said. His face was very serious, but Lucy was smiling. "Your what?" she seemed to be saying. "Oh, your life." She tipped her head and smiled. After all, she might have said, this was an ordinary occurrence. People change other people's lives every day of the year. There was no call to make such a fuss about it. People change people's lives every day of the year. It is in our relationships, in our relationship with others, in our relationship with God, that we find our true selves. And when we allow our lives to be changed by the love of others and by the responsibility we take for others, then we can find our true selves. We can gain our life by losing.